there's been a lot of movement in the last week or so around Greenland, around EU, and for those who did not know already, the World Economic Forum is currently meeting in Davos. So whenever you hear Davos man and the elites and all of that, this is what they're referring to. A lot of folks in the Trump administration are currently there speaking. Trump himself spoke, I believe it was yesterday. Um, Scott Bessent as well, Howard Lutnick, and then obviously EU leaders across the board. And I think Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you here to kind of intro Christine Lagarde here. We're going to put up a video in a second, but maybe just describe what the video is before we turn to that for the viewers here.
Yep. So Cameron, good setup. Davos itself, just think of it as the biggest ski party in the world or most exclusive ski party in the world for the West elites, right? So you think about this, not so much, Asia, not so much Russia. Like the focus is on the post-World War II Western coalition, um, government officials, business leaders, regulators, etc. They all come, they talk about what they're doing, basically like a big picture conference environment, but the ones, unlike whatever conferences you attend in your industry are, dear viewer, this is for the people in the big club that most of us are not in. So for background here, this year's was a different tone than any other since I've been following this, as I entered, the workforce as like a young adult, probably about the time of like 2008. Different tone here, and you're going to see it and how we cover this going forward. But I think to start it off, one of the clips that set this up, you look at the different leaders amongst the West, you call it the Atlantic Coalition, East Coast of the United States, European old wealth, bureaucrats, etc. You see Christine Lagarde in this video look more flustered and just a full loss of composure, in my opinion, as I'm watching this, than I've ever seen before. Probably the only leader I saw who maintained the sense of composure in their comments or in their speaking appearances was Ursula von der Leyen. Would stand out highly. Nothing really big announced there. But let's just go into it with this clip, Cameron, from Christine Lagarde speaking with CNN International.
This is a wake-up call, a bigger one than we ever had. And I think that Europe is going to look at its strength, look at its weaknesses, do a big SWOT analysis and decide what do we need to do to be strong by ourselves, to be more independent, to rely on the internal trade that we do with each other so that we can just not ignore, but at least be prepared and have a plan B just in case the normal relationship is not restored. This is a wake.
So again, that was Christine Lagarde delivering her remarks at Davos. So Matt,
I mean, what you heard there, we're going to do a SWOT analysis. We're going to move to our plan B. We're going to examine how to trade within our internal block, within ourselves. And I mean, you just see the rattling, everything coming into this. And I think if you think as an outside observer, well, what got them here, right? Why are they so rattled? What is going on? If you're not following the story closely over the last few years or decade, you see this stuff and it makes no sense to you. But I think what you're seeing under the hood, under the scenes, we'll get into this in a second, but all the big stories we've been covering over the last 12 months or since the November 2024 elections, trade deals, Liberation Day, gold and silver breaking out, old metals and commodity market pricing structures breaking down, failing to work, central banks turning to gold as currency reserves, all of this, all of these death by 1,000 cuts. And these aren't just little cuts, these are like big hits. But I think all of that is culminating to the surface. And what you see here is the old institutionalists, the old guard, who have a primary interest in maintaining the old status quo, coming to the realization that the old framework is basically completely busted, right? We'll get into that, like how did it bust, but um, just to make a fun analogy here to get into the weeds this week. How do I frame this as like a peak millennial, right? In my childhood, and an understanding of the world, and how to make this kind of relatable for everybody else to pick up what's going on. I think what you're seeing this week started off. We called the first slide here, the topic we'll cover, as the Great Schism of the West. This is like the moment of breakage, right? This is the key moment. Um, and yeah, it is pivotal at this point. It's irreversible. It's not going back. Humpty Dumpty's fallen off the wall and can't be put back together. I think what we're looking at was like as big of a moment in terms of the big narrative as some of these larger breaks amongst the Western European power base, or American power base as it became post 1776. And framing this in my childhood, you're looking at like make or break moments, right? And one of the things that stands out, like who is the GOAT, right? You go into the like athletes of all time. It's Michael Jordan, right? The penultimate. And what we just saw at Davos was like one of the um, I would just call it just routings. Like we literally called it that in one of our second topical summaries. But I think in terms of watching this split, like what the Trump coalition or the Trump administration members came in and did at this kind of Davos dismantling that we just saw, it looks a lot like this 1998 Jordan Bulls, which had like a formative experience on me as a child, realizing like just what it looks like for two competing factions out on the basketball court in this case. One of those just to be completely dominant over the other, and at the end of the day you have uh, no dispute in terms of who's ranked where in terms of the hierarchy,
The
right?
score really, I mean, just this is 96 to
Yeah.
54. It's not even close.
Oh yeah. So what I wanted to get at here, remember, we all look back, everybody who's followed Michael Jordan or the 1990s NBA basketball, you've seen this picture of this, like the last shot, right? And it was on that the Last Dance documentary that captured everybody's attention during the lockdowns, right? Michael Jordan saved us from COVID insanity, for most of us, or many of us, right? But you see this shot, this crossover, Byron Russell, the haters say he pushed off. That's just, left
Lutan,
excuse, right?
baby, yeah.
But anyway, for me watching this, every game of that 1998 NBA Finals, peak NBA, in my opinion, this wasn't when the series was decided, right? This was the final shot, and this was the closeout. And it's the picture everybody puts on their, posters in the in the office, who, are men in my era, aged back at 40s, 50s, etc., who want to remember the good old days. But the actual deciding moment of this series wasn't game 6, that final shot. It was game 3 when we go in there. And, for people who watch The Last Dance, right? It was a back and forth between this Utah Jazz team, Karl Malone, John Stockton, who wanted to challenge the great, power or force of nature that Michael Jordan was. And you had other, all-time Hall of Famers on that team, Scottie Pippen, no disregard, Tony Kukoc, etc. But it's a Michael Jordan story, right? You get in game 1 and 2, it's back and forth, Bulls are on the road, but the series was won in game 3. And in that game, Cameron, you were talking about this, the Bulls come out and just completely dismantle the Utah Jazz and end up winning 96 to 54. And I can't get across like how dominant of just a complete shellacking this was by Michael Jordan on what's supposed to be one of his signature opponents. This 54 points that they held the Utah Jazz to, which was supposed to be also kind of an all-time team or a challenger team, never got over that hump, so they can't be by definition, in my opinion. 54 points in that game represented the lowest team score by an offense in a game in an NBA game in the shot clock era. And this came in the pivotal swing game in the NBA
Wild.
Finals. So, my opinion, what we just saw at Davos was almost one of those. Like, it was just a complete obliteration. And then you saw it in Christine Lagarde's face. For those of you good at reading posture, body language, etc., like what I see there is just, it's like that coach at halftime who is just completely lost. He's overpowered, all of that. So Europe's going back to plan B. You hear media, Gavin Newsom trying to stir Western leaders in this other clip we didn't show to stand up, stand tall, try to put up some resistance to, what was just accomplished in the last few days, and put the cherry on top at this Davos convention. But that's what we're talking about as an analogy here on what we just witnessed. So let's get into it, make a little sense of that, because I think to a lot of people, it may not yet be clear. The West itself, the post-World War II order of Western liberal democracies, stood together, tied together with like organizations that crossed over the Atlantic, whether it's NATO, IMF, Atlantic Council, etc. You can go down a long list of names. This week at Davos represented like the complete fracturing. There's not a united West anymore. This old kind of governing consensus or power consensus with the Western liberal democracies that collectively interacted and operated as a whole. I'd include, list off the nations, Eurozone members like EU countries, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, etc., being, a core block, United Kingdom, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Taiwan. That block is separate. Like they're not operating as a whole anymore. And that's crystal clear. We'll get into that in a second. But that's what we're looking at here. And that's why, for those people who say AI is soulless and can't put together good art, I spun this up. This is I don't know what you call it, satirical photo in the style of the Washington crossing the Delaware that's showcased at the Met Museum in New York. It's an American treasure as a piece of art itself. What we just saw at Davos at this ski trip was reminiscent of that crossing of the Delaware in terms of big picture history, in my opinion. So you get into the setup here. Why do I say that fracture or that coalition, that post-World War II coalition of Western democracies has been fractured? Starting Friday night or Friday evening, after markets closed, weeks wrapped, we started to get the setup going into Davos, right? I'd say two key headlines that came across the blotter. These were in progress late last week, but you had Mark Carney, PM of Canada, and Gavin Newsom, both going, I guess, separately and independently, but also, they're doing the exact same thing. So I would say they're an aligned couple of players behind a Western power faction. They go to mainland China. They meet with Xi Jinping's government. They strike deals, MOUs, etc., largely covering, kind of just rehashing the same key topic points of the last 10 to 20 years that the Western coalition has been putting. What do I mean by that? Climate change, clean tech, travel, tourism, cultural appreciation stuff. But in the big picture, these are not needle movers, in my opinion. And I know that's a subjective statement, but I think given the nature of what we've witnessed for kind of at least a couple of decades at this point, you could say maybe starting with September 11th, but definitely by 2008, it was obvious that those old, post-World War II Western rules-based order kind of institutional framework, all of that, those were on their last legs. We were set for some sort of transition, some replacement to whatever order is coming next. Hear that in Mark Carney, or you heard that in Mark Carney's statements he gave, talking about the new world order, that he thought this. Yeah, it's in there at the back of the quote. He paused after every word for emphasis. If those key things, those topic points that were hit on in these MOUs between mainland China, CCP, the Xi Jinping version iteration of the CCP, I'll get into that in a second, and the state of California under Gavin Newsom, Canada itself, represented by Mark Carney. If those talking points had the legs and actual momentum behind it for real market adoption, after 20 years of this, there would be more consensus. They would be delivering results. You would see it working. And I think the fact of the matter is none of it is actually working. So from my standpoint, like this, what we just saw at Davos was, potentially, never say never, but I think it was the final attempt to build a kind of a consensus structure around these old ideas that have been propagating since the late 90s, or maybe even before that, but 2000s, 2010s, etc. Those days are over, in my opinion.